Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Robbie Rhino, and in today's video I will be reviewing the brand new Ultimate Season Pass tank for the new Gladiators season. It is of course the 30B2 FORAD, but before we get into today's review, just a quick announcement. Thank you so much to everyone for being patient whilst I've been away for just shy of a couple weeks. Had some more health issues along with some family situations to deal with, but hopefully that will be the end of the personal drama now, and I can get back to making a little bit more regular content for you all and also enjoying the brand new season myself. So thank you very much to everyone for your patience, and there will be a review, probably a mini review of the World War II level 100 tank for the Gladiators season, the tier 10 Italian auto reloading medium tank, and that will be in the coming days. But today's video is all about the AMX 30B2 FORAD, and let's have a look at the tank in question and see how much it costs you to get the tank. Well, let's have a look at the price first as we scroll on down, and as it's the Ultimate Season Pass tank for the Gladiators season, you get it on purchase of the Ultimate Season Pass, which is 6,000 gold as it has been for a while, and that's a pretty good price for an Era 2 premium medium tank. And this tank, it's definitely not OP, but it's definitely not a bad tank as well, and it's well worth that price. And I always find the Ultimate Season Pass is a pretty good price, especially if you play World War II and Cold War at the same time. Not at the same time, but you know what I mean. You play both modes on your account. We're going to scroll on down here and have a look at the tank itself. Just like I mentioned, it is a Western Alliance Era 2 medium tank. It is a French medium tank, of course, hence the AMX bit in the name, and it does look like an AMX 30B, just a lot more modern. So here is the artwork Wargaming have put up alongside the back there, of which looks like an abbey, which is pretty cool in tying with the Gladiators season. And it does have a very nice skin on the tank as well, and I think it's one of the better looking medium tanks in Era 2 of Cold War. So that's what it looks like. What do Wargaming say about this tank? Well, they say that it is has a fast firing secondary autocannon, a 105mm gun with high penetration. That's stretching it a little bit, but it's still good penetration, and it does have some nice mobility as well. So we're going to hop on over to the Excel spreadsheet and have a look at the stats of this tank. And in this particular review, I'll be comparing the 30B2 to the Leopard 1A1, the WZ122, and the Super M48. The reason being, they're similar in their hit points. They're all Era 2 medium tanks. In the case of the WZ122, that does have 80 GMs and the use of the multiple weapon system like the 30B2 does have, so it's a nice sort of comparison to a tank that people might pick up because it has a unique feature in the sense that the 30B2 can fire that 20mm autocannon as a secondary gun choice on this tank. And yeah, they're similar in their hit points. They're all fairly mobile medium tanks in Era 2, and it'll be a good comparison to see how this thing stacks up to a lot of premium tanks that if you played Cold War for a while you definitely might have. So we're going to start off with the Silver Bonus XP and Commander XP bonus of all of these tanks, and then we're going to get stuck into the raw stats of this vehicle. If you haven't seen my reviews before in terms of the color coding, green is the best stat, red's the worst, and orange is somewhere in between, and highlighted in yellow is the updated stats with my commander and equipment setup applied, and I'll talk you through that as we go on through the review, as well as talking about the lack of armor this tank has. And then I have 5 gameplays at the end of today's video to show you how this tank performs on the battlefield. When you are looking at the highlighted stats there, and there is an or, that means I am running 2 different setups, or there are 2 different setups I would recommend to start off with this vehicle, and I'll talk you through that when we get to the relevant section. So let's start off by having a look at the silver bonus of the 30B2, and as you can see it is 50%, which is the joint worst in this comparison by 15%. The Leopard 1A1 comes out on top with 65% silver bonus, but as it's an Era 2 premium tank, you'll still be making a pretty nice chunk of silver, but not as much as the other vehicles, even the ones like the WZ-122 and Super M48, because of the ammunition that this tank carries, and I'll talk you through that when we talk about the gun, but you'll still make a nice chunk of silver. If you want to get the best silver earner in Era 2, this definitely probably isn't the best choice. Next, XP bonus of 25%, which is the best in this comparison by 15%. And in terms of the command XP bonus, 10%. It's the joint worst in this comparison, with the Leopard 1A1 15% behind the WZ-122 and the Super M48. So not great news in terms of the bonuses, but still enough to make it a pretty good purchase at 6,000 gold. So next we're going to have a look at the hit points, the view range and still concealment of all of these medium tanks. So the 30B2 FORAD comes in at 2,600 hit points. That is about 100, well exactly 100 more than the Leopard 1A1, which is a tank many players have if you've played Cold War for a while. It is a little bit better than the WZ-122, which is a very popular Era 2 Eastern Alliance premium medium tank, but it does suffer in comparison to things like the Super M48 or a Leopard VT2, something like that, with more armour and more hit points, but you have enough hit points to be able to take a few shots, and you're not going to be bouncing many rounds at all unless you get extremely lucky, so you do have to adopt a support style play style in the 30B2. Next, the view range, 520 meters base view range, which is the best in this comparison, and it's very nice indeed. When you do have your commander and equipment set up fully pimped out, you can get this to a very nice level, and it actually does help you to get a lot more assistance than I found in any other Era 2 medium tank that I've played. It might just be because I'm playing it in a certain way at the moment, however I seem to be getting a ton of spotting assistance with this tank. Very nice to have that view range, and it does give you that little bit of extra XP when you have the ability to spot for yourself. Next, there's still concealment, and as these are medium tanks and there's true vision in play in Cold War, it's hard to tell how efficient this concealment is, but as you can see, highlighted in orange, it's somewhere in the middle. It's not quite as good as the Leopard 1A1, but only by a little bit, and it's much better than something like the Super M48. So with that view range and that concealment, if you're hiding in foliage on the maps like the bushes and trees, you might be able to outspot some of the larger medium tanks or slower medium tanks with armour and heavy tanks, and that can obviously benefit you. Next, we're going to have a look at the mobility, and as an AMX 30 variant, you're going to be hoping it has good mobility, and yeah, it's not far off having pretty decent mobility. You have an engine power of 720, a power to weight ratio of 19.5, your top forward speed is 65 kilometers an hour, your top reverse speed is 23 kilometers an hour, your whole traverse is 44 degrees a second, and the traverse on your turret is 40 degrees a second. So you can see there are a few best in classes here in terms of the power to weight, top forward speed and your turret traverse, and there are a few sort of in the middle stats in terms of this comparison. So you don't have the biggest engine, which means that you don't have the best power to weight because you aren't an extremely overweight tank, so it's not as good a power to weight as something like a Leopard 1A1, which really does sort of seem to fly across the terrain easier, and I think it feels a lot faster than it is because of the terrain resistances on the Leopard 1A1 seem to be a lot better than the FORAD, because they are similar in terms of their power to weight, hence why I have put green for both of them, even though the FORAD is 0.5 worse. You are a lot faster across the ground than something like the WZ-122 or a Super M48. In the case of the Super M48 and the Leopard VT2 and things like that, you have extra spaced armour, hence you're heavier, and that's why you are slower. But that power to weight is what pushes you up the hills and makes it easier to climb steep inclines. So 19.5 power to weight ratio, Very similar to the Leopard 1A1, falls behind it just by a little bit, but it's fairly decent as a base rate and joint best in this comparison. In terms of the top forward speed, 65 kilometers an hour, very nice indeed, only 0.2 off of the Leopard 1A1, and it does beat the WZ122 and Super M48 by quite some way. And if you use the mobility pieces of equipment, and I either run both of them or one of them in both of my setups I'll discuss in just a little bit, then you can get these figures down up to very good figures indeed, making it very nice and maneuverable across the battlefield. In terms of the hull traverse, 44 degrees a second, not quite as good as the Leopard 1A1, and it's also not quite as good as the WZ122, which is 46 degrees a second, but it does beat the Super M48. And when you do boost up the mobility with the mobility equipment, the traction system in particular helps with your traverse speeds, and when you get up to your full top speed, you can maneuver on the battlefield very nicely. Lastly, turret traverse best in class here, 40 degrees a second. That means that you don't have to do too much to improve that, although gun handling skills on your commander will improve that to a very nice level. And if you look at these two figures here that I have highlighted, then my hull traverse and turret traverse are very high indeed, and yeah, very in keeping with a medium tank. So it's a big plus in terms of this tank for its mobility, and that's good news because you are a relatively large profile medium tank, and you don't have any armor, you're a glass cannon tank, so you're going to want to try and get into positions and flank your opponents and try and make crossfire on the maps instead of brawling, whereas you can do something like that in the Super M48 or something with better armor. Next, we're going to get on to the fun part of all tanks, and that is the gun. The 30B2 FORAD has a 105mm gun, the same as the 1A1 and the Super M48, and the only tank that has a different gun in this comparison is the WZ122, which has a 120mm gun. Obviously, they were to make it as confusing as possible. So the B30B2 FORAD fires 3 different rounds. It fires heat as its standard ammunition, which is very, very unusual. APF SDS as its premium ammunition choice, and that's obviously the other way around usually, and HE as its third ammunition choice. The speed on the heat rounds is 1000 meters a second. The speed on the APF SDS rounds are 1525 meters a second and 700 meters a second for your HE rounds. Your penetration on your standard heat rounds are 400mm, so not the worst, but definitely not the best. 482mm on your premium APF SDS with the better shell velocity, and that's a pretty good value that is able to penetrate the front of every tank you will be able to come across, and 125mm of HE penetration. If you carry a few HE rounds for those light tanks, you can completely shred them, especially if you make use of the 20mm autocannon, which I'll talk about down here in just a little bit. But let's quickly talk about heat as a standard ammunition choice. This is very unusual, and it is quite annoying because these are the inexpensive rounds and the rounds that will make you a lot of silver if you penetrate them. Heat is notoriously difficult to use in Era 2 and Era 3 of Cold War because of all the composite and explosive reactive armor which presents against heat, HE and ATGM ammunition. The good thing about heat is that it retains all penetration over distance, meaning that you're going to get that 400 no matter how far you're shooting across the map. However, it does suffer in terms of its shell velocity at those distances, and at those distances it's hard to miss spaced armoured parts of the tank, so I can find that extremely annoying. Penetration, although it's not as good as something like the Leopard 1A1, which has 449mm of standard pen, like the Super M48, it's better than the WZ122, and it's a decent figure. It's just whether you're able to use the heat rounds. So I carry a lot of premium rounds because of that better shell velocity and also because of the better penetration. And if you penetrate a lot of your premium rounds, you're still going to be making silver, whereas if you're bouncing continuously your standard rounds and not firing any premium, you're going to either end up losing silver or hardly making any profit at all, and you might as well have just loaded the premium in the first place. So that's definitely something to be aware of with this tank. And I haven't mentioned it now, I probably should mention it. The alpha damage on these rounds are 460 for your standard and your premium ammunition, and 570 for your HE penetration. The 460 and 570 is the same as the ammunition on the Leopard 1A1 and the Super M48, and the WZ-122's 120mm gun only has 10mm more. 10 alpha damage more on its standard and its premium round, so yeah, not too much difference there. So overall, a little bit disappointing in terms of how the gun is set up. However, those APF SDS rounds as premium rounds are very nice, with a very nice shell velocity of 1525 meters a second. Not quite as good as something like the standard rounds on the WZ-122, which have 1615 meters a second, but it does mean that you're able to snipe very well and not have to give too much lead at sort of mid to long ranges. You have that better penetration, and as long as you pen the shots, you're still going to be making a nice profit. Disappointing HE rounds, in my opinion, pretty slow, worst in class, as you can see, in terms of the shell velocity, the penetration, and joint worst in class HE compared to the 120mm on the WZ-122. But that's not too bad, because I only carry heat and APF SDS because of that 20mm autocannon, which is your secondary gun, and I'll tell you why just after we talk about the gun handling of this 105mm gun. So in terms of this 105mm gun on the 30B2 FORAD, 2-second aim time, which is the joint worst in this comparison, but being joint worst against other tanks which have 2 seconds aim time isn't too bad at all. The Leopard 1A1 just pips these other tanks by 0.3 of a second, but you can get that down to a very nice level indeed. You do, however, have the best accuracy by some way at 0.26 base accuracy. You don't have to do a lot to get this down with your command and equipment setup, which means you can invest into other skills. You can see here that it beats something like the Leopard 1A1, which has pretty decent 0.32 by a long way, and it obliterates things like the WZ-122 and Super M48. In terms of the DPM, you have a very nice 3,537 DPM, only ever slightly worse than the Leopard 1A1, which is why I've still left it in green here as a joint best in this comparison, and both the 30B2 and the Leopard 1A1 completely obliterate the WZ-122 and the Super M48 in terms of the DPM, so it does have very nice DPM indeed if you are able to make use of the ammunition. And that DPM means that you have a base reload for one shot of 7.8 seconds, which is very nice indeed. You carry 50 rounds of ammunition on this 105mm gun, not quite as many as the Leopard 1A1, which carries 60, but 10 more than the WZ-122, and only 4 less than the Super M48, so enough for most battles you're going to be in. And lastly, in terms of the gun depression, 8 degrees, and gun elevation 20 degrees. 8 degrees of gun depression. It's better than the WZ-122, but it is 1 degree worse than the Leopard 1A1 and Super M48. A little bit disappointing, but you definitely can make that work on many ridge lines. And the fact that you use this mainly as a support tank, trying to create crossfire from different positions of the map, it's not too big of an issue. Lastly, joint best in terms of gun elevation, 20 degrees, which is very unlike a French tank to have good elevation. It beats the Super M48 by 1 degree, and it's the same as the 1A1 and the WZ-122. So take home in terms of the talk about the 105mm on the FORAD is that it's got a disappointing heat standard ammunition. I wish it was just the other way around, but pretty nice premium ammunition with good shell velocity and decent pen. The penetration on the standard rounds is still more than enough, and you have a nice alpha damage as well. In terms of the gun handling, you don't have the best aim time, you have the worst or joint worst in the comparison, but you do have the best accuracy, very, very nice DPM, enough ammunition and enough gun depression and elevation. And you're going to be seeing throughout all of these stats, a lot of it is highlighted in yellow for the 30B2, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just a very good middle of the road medium tank. And it does have this unique feature, which I will go over now for you, and that is the fact that it does have a secondary gun. It has a 20mm autocannon, which has 75 shots per clip, and it can deal 1875 or 2250 damage in 5.92 seconds from the first shot, and that is because it fires 2 different types of ammunition. You have APDS rounds, which are the standard rounds on this secondary 20mm gun. They have 1300 meters a second shell velocity, which is very nice for a secondary gun, 87mm of penetration and 25 alpha damage. And you also have HE rounds, which have 1050 meters a second, so very nice for HE, 45mm of penetration, and your alpha damage jumps up only by 5 to 30. So it does look pretty poor in terms of the pen and the alpha damage, and of course it is for Era 2, but it has an extremely fast rate of fire, and if you're able to penetrate even a quarter of this, you can absolutely shred some light tanks that have no armor, or shred other tanks like the 30B2 or the Leopard 181, or anything that doesn't have thick armor. This can be very useful for fast firing into the sides and rear of tanks, and you're able to use this without time penalty by switching over from the 105 by holding down the ammo select button, and whilst this is reloading you can switch back to your 105, and if you utilize both of these ammunition choices you can go very far with the 30B2 FORAD. Of course you just have to make that penetration work, but it does have surprisingly good shell velocity on both the APDS and the HE ammunition. Of course these DPM, or the damage I should say, in 5.92 seconds is because you have a 0.08 intra-clip reload per shot, or per 74 of those shots. You're not going to be doing that much damage unless you are firing into something you definitely can penetrate every single time, but it's definitely a nice feature, a unique feature, and something nice to have on a medium tank rather than on, say, a light tank like the BMP 2 and the BMP 3 and that line in Era 2 of Cold War. In terms of the comparison here between the secondary ammunition selection on the WZ-122, of course that has a 4-shot ATGM autoloader which can deal 3.4k damage in 30 seconds. I'm just going to do a quick comparison of whether you're thinking of maybe getting this or over the WZ-122 or vice versa. There are a couple of things you do have to bear in mind. Of course, the WZ-122's ATGMs are going to be much more useful on the battlefield due to the fact they have great penetration, fantastic alpha damage, and of course you can do a monstrous amount of damage with your ATGMs. If you're not very good with ATGMs, 120 meters a second on them are going to be very difficult to use. However, the 30B2 FORAD is mainly for lightly armoured medium tanks and basically for light tanks and completely shredding the light tanks. So yeah, it's just a nice little comparison there. So I've highlighted the good parts there in green and the red parts there in bad of this secondary ammunition. In terms of this 20mm autocannon, a 2.3 second aim time, 0.22 accuracy, your DPM is 5,378, which, yeah, it does look the best in this comparison. So why have I highlighted it in red? Well, the asterisk there is because I wanted to just say you can't really take that DPM into consideration unless you are firing continuously into something you know you can penetrate every single time with 87mm of penetration in Era 2, and it's just not plausible for most of the time, which is why I've highlighted here in green the DPM of the ATGM autoloader on the WZ-122. It's just going to be more feasible, especially for a newer player or someone that likes their ATGMs. In terms of the reload for this 20mm autocannon, it's 15 seconds, and like I've just alluded to, a 0.08 intraclip reload. It does go very, very fast indeed, and you're able to deal a lot of damage to lightly armoured tanks in very quick succession, especially if you're switching between this and the 105mm gun. And you can carry 1,050 rounds in terms of this 20mm auto cannon. because obviously you fire them so quickly, and I've definitely not run out of the secondary ammunition, so definitely nothing to worry about there. Whereas the WZ-122 can carry 2 whole clips of 480 GMs per battle, and you definitely can't run out of that, so that's definitely something to take into consideration there. But that's it for the raw stats of the 30B2 compared to these other tanks. I'm now going to talk you through my commander and equipment setups, and then I'll talk you through the how it affects the stats here, highlighted in yellow. Then we're going to have a quick look at some pictures of the armor on the 30B2 FORAD, and then we're going to get stuck into 5 gameplays for you today to show you how this tank performs on the battlefield. So in terms of commander and equipment setups, I have tried 2 different setups that I'd like to share with you and how they affect the stats of the 30B2 FORAD. One is a mainly mobility based setup, and one is a mobility based setup but with added DPM to it, sacrificing just a little bit of the DPM. And I'll start off by talking you through the DPM setup, which is the one you're going to see on the left in these boxes here highlighted in yellow, and then we're going to get talking through the setup of the 30B2 FORAD, which is my mobility setup. So in terms of running a setup specifically to help the DPM of the tank, I would go with advanced loader, I would go with improved ventilation, and then I would go with the traction system. And if I was going to be going for a setup with my equipment in terms of mobility, both pieces of mobility equipment, the advanced powertrain and the traction system, and then I'd still keep the advanced loader. So the difference is taking out the advanced powertrain for the improvements just to help the view range and of course that pretty nice DPM that you already have. And in terms of my commander, it's the same for both of these setups. I have 6th sense, born leader, rapid loading, steady aim, rapid aim, snapshot, run and gun. I run off-road driving to help the mobility regarding of which setup I use in terms of my equipment. And lastly, I run track mechanic because I don't have any armor and I want to get my tracks on as quick as possible. So I think there's a good starting point there for you, and it's up to you whether you tinker around with that, but I think that's a pretty good starting setup if you do have a 9 skill commander. So how does the equipment and commander setup affect the stats of the 30B2 FORAD? Well, as you can see here, I have the DPM setup here on the left and the mobility on the right. So my view range would have gone up to 553.34 or 542.36. My still concealment rating has dropped to 336.51 meters. In terms of the engine power, with the DPM build, it's 720, it stays the same, and with the mobility setup, 756 engine power. Of course, with the DPM setup, the power to weight again stays the same, whereas the power to weight goes up with the mobility to 20.43. In terms of the top forward speed, it increases to 71.5 with my DPM build, or 75.07 kilometers an hour forwards with the mobility build. The reverse speed is 25.3 kilometers an hour with the DPM build and 26.56 kilometers an hour in reverse with the mobility build. The hold reverse goes up to 48.4 degrees a second for both of these setups. I'm obviously just confusing myself there, and then I'm going to have to put the seconds in there for completion. Lastly, turret reverse, it goes up to 47.48 degrees a second. That's with the DPM build, and it only goes up to 46.31 degrees a second with the mobility build. And the reason for that is that the ventilation does also obviously improve the effectiveness of the skills, therefore the turret reverse will be improving. I finally got there. I hope I explained that well enough for you. Lastly, what does it change in terms of the gun handling and DPM? Well, with the DPM build, it's gone from 2 seconds to 1.88 seconds, or 1.92 seconds with the mobility build. The accuracy drops down to 0.22 with both builds. The DPM build is 4,729 from a base of 3,537, and with the mobility build it just drops a little bit to 4,609 from 3,537 DPM. Lastly, how long is the reload for either of the builds? Well, the DPM build 5.84 seconds for one shot, and with the mobility build 5.99 seconds per shot, so not a massive difference, just enough. And of course with the vents you will be improving your view range, effectiveness of other skills, things like that will help you out, especially the gun handling as well. So that's it for the commander and equipment section of today's review. We're now going to have a look at a few of the armoured plates, and I'm just going to put the pictures up. I was going to go into the garage, but there really isn't any point because this tank doesn't have any armour. The thickest part of the armour, as you can see here, is 270mm on the mantlet. Most tanks have enough to go straight through the front of this. Other things to note on this tank would be that the cupola is 100mm from the front, and it is massive, like an AMX 30B, easy to see on a ridgeline and very easy to penetrate, even for a lot of HE rounds, so definitely watch out for them when you're playing this vehicle. You do have these 80mm sides of the turret here, which can occasionally ricochet shots, so definitely shoot towards the mantlet rather than the sides of the turret if it's facing you like this, or if it's on a ridgeline and facing you with the gun pointing at you, because you could ricochet off the sides of this, and that's probably one of the only areas where you actually can ricochet off. Upper plate of 55mm, and the large portion of the lower plate is 55mm, so when it's angled at a steep sort of 45-50 degree angle, you might get some lucky auto ricochet angles or higher than that when you're moving in and out of cover, but it's definitely not something you can rely on. Very disappointingly for me, the side armor is 30mm, which means that you cannot side scrape in this tank unless you are side scraping against anything under 91mm or less. If you're trying to side scrape against a gun caliber above 91mm, like a 105mm gun, they will overmatch your sight every time. You do have some spaced armor over the back of the turret to prevent against ATGM, so definitely watch out for that if you're firing ATGMs into the back of this turret, which you don't do. You just go straight through the rear of this vehicle, and don't shoot the barrels on the back. They are just classified as spaced armor. If you're shooting them from the side, you're not going to be able to penetrate and go through, but it's a glass cannon tank. The only chances you have of ricocheting are at a very steep angle on the upper plate or from the sides of the turret from the front. The rest is fair game, and you're going to be easily penetrated, especially by the secondary ammunition on this tank itself, the 30B2. If you get up behind another one of these tanks in your 30B2, you've got 30mm of rear armor to shoot into and penetrate every single time, even with the 20mm HE rounds. So make use of that. So that's it for the talk about the armor on the 30B2 FORAD. We're now going to get stuck into the first of 5 gameplays. So we're now into the first of 5 gameplays in today's video. We are here in the AMX 30B2 FORAD on Thiepval Ridge. We have spawned in the northwestern corner, and this is a standard battle, and we're going to make our way as quickly as possible towards the hill situated in E8, E9. I'm going to get there as quickly as possible with the great mobility of this tank and try and get a little bit of vision out for my team, as I know there are usually a lot of enemies on this hill trying to shoot towards our base. If I'm able to get here first, I'm the one that's going to be getting the assistance for anyone that does support me in firing. This can be a risky position because it's quite hotly contested at the start of a battle, and in a tank that doesn't have any armor you do have to be a little bit careful, but you do have this massive ridge to fall back from, and if they chase you, you're baiting them over the ridge and your enemies will hopefully get shredded by the enemies that are behind you. So Always make sure if you come in this position from the spawn that we have just spawned into in this game that you do have supporting fire. As you can see, we have a nice line of tanks still at the base. Hopefully their intention was just to support me, otherwise I don't know why they're still there. But we also do have a nice glut of tanks behind me that are going to be able to support me should I spot any tanks here on this hill. We finally get a spot there on that M60 A1 I believe it was, and we get a quick snapshot, slightly high rolling there by 9 alpha damage, and then we fall back down the ridge. He doesn't get shot at by our team, which is a bit disappointing. I'm just being very careful poking over here. You've got to be careful of tanks that are towards the south of the enemy's base when it is this setup on Thiepval Ridge, but I want to try and get a little bit of vision out where possible. I do have my enhanced smoke screen, which I carry on this tank to try and save me in a position like that. When I get spotted, I'm going to pop it, and then I'm going to pop up from a different location and try and get some vision. Try and save my hit points for as long as possible, because the longer I keep them in a tank like this, the longer they're going to be effective. That's the same for pretty much any tank, but especially for tanks that have a unique secondary gun or have great DPM. You can utilize that at the end, take a hit because you don't have any armor, you'll get penetrated, but you might do very well indeed, and boost up your damage at the end of the game. So we've spotted that M60A1 again on this hill. He gets shot by someone at the back. We get a nice bit of assistance there. We get another shot into his tracks. As you can see, I am firing some heat, so with the build for mobility, which I'm using at the moment, is when I carry, I think it's 10 heat rounds, 35 APF SDS, which are the premium rounds, and I carry 5 of the HE rounds as well, and I carry full premium with the DPM build because I'm still making a lot of silver and the heat is just quite annoying to use, especially if there are a lot of FE4 to 11s and things like that on the enemy team. So here in the AMX 30B2 FORAD, we've been in this position for a while and there's no need to push too aggressively at the moment. We do have enemies that are crossing towards our base and we occasionally have side shots on them. We get a nice spot there on this Leopard 105 in the distance. It looks like he is still there as I can see something moving between the trees, so we fire again and get another shot into him, and we also get a bit of tracking assistance as well. A third shot, for some reason, he either has used his repair kit or doesn't carry a repair kit, which would be a crime, especially in Cold War when you can get ripped to shreds very quickly. But I make the mistake of feeling too comfortable, sat in the same position firing, and I rightly get shot at because of that reason. We get spotted again. I'm going to use this dead tank as cover, pop the smoke screen, get undetected, then hopefully I'm going to get back off of this hill if I have any kind of brain. But there is a teammate coming here, so I've told the teammate to attack, and hopefully we can get below the gun line of the enemies in the rear, and then we can get behind these tanks at the bottom. But as luck would have it, I managed to get stuck on a hill there. Fortunately, I don't get completely taken out, and I'm able to come down here, switch to the 20mm autocannon and assist my teammate there in taking out the enemy tank. And now it's this Leopard 103 trying to help my teammates out, but we do get taken out, quite rightly so there. I was aggressive at the wrong moment, but it just goes to show with that multiple weapon system and switching between the 20mm autocannon and the 105, you can deal some very nice damage very quickly. So that's going to be a little bit of time until my team managed to take the rest of this game down. We are 4 tanks in the lead, but I'm going to skip towards the end and then we're going to see how we did in this first game. So, like I told you, we did win that game. Our teammates took that one down for us. We didn't finish in the top 3, but we had a fairly decent result there. 4.7k direct damage, 1,383 assistance, a nice profit with or without a premium account of either 278 or 337,000 silver. No kills, but that's a very standard kind of battle I've been having in the AMX 30B2 FORAD. Very, very good support tank. Sometimes you don't have the best games, but if you do enough, you definitely can support your team to victory. So that's it for the first game there. We're now going to get stuck into the second gameplay. Here we are on Redshire in the second game of today's video. We're here in the AMX 30B2 FORAD and we have spawned in the southeastern corner in a standard battle, and we're going to head straight into the centre of the map here on Redshire to the base of the hill in G4, G5, and we're going to see if we can get some vision, very much like we did in the previous battle on Thiepval Ridge. Going to race into position. We're using the mobility build that I use in this particular gameplay, and we're going to try and get some vision to start off with. We've already got a little bit of assistance there on that Mobat, and we're going to put a shell in our cells there and get a bit of damage where we high roll for 489 damage. This is a great tank for racing into position and getting some early spots off. Then you can fall back with the mobility and put this gun to work in a sniping capacity. You can see at sort of mid to short ranges, the heat is a little bit easier to sort of manage with that slower 1000 meters a second shell velocity, and at this early stage we're more than likely going to meet other faster tanks that have lighter armor. This Scorpion 90 is going to come over after us. We're going to get one into him. As he comes over, we're going to reverse. We are a lot heavier as a medium tank than he is. Then we're going to switch by holding down the ammo select button to our 20mm autocannon, and we are going to follow that up by a killing shot with the 105mm gun, and in very quick succession there we managed to deal nearly 1000 assistance and 2000 direct damage. It looks like the enemy team have gone full idiot mode or YOLO mode, whatever you want to call it right now, so we're going to get out of dodge, use our mobility to try and fall back, and then we can try and snipe them as they come in. And this is where the great mobility of this tank comes into play, and while I'm very happy in this particular gameplay I was using my mobility build. We have lost a substantial amount of hit points there, showing you there isn't any armor on this tank, but the fact we had the ability to fight back with that Scorpion 90 with the weight of our tank, with the 20mm autocannon and the 105mm gun, shows you that, you know, every gun has its day, and yeah, it can be useful, especially against those pesky light tanks early on in the battle. And now it's just a case of getting crossfire on enemies, sitting back at our mid to long ranges, and we're going to snipe these tanks as they come over into the open ground. We've already done a fairly nice amount of work, getting a kill, getting over 1000 assistance and over 3k direct damage, and now we're just going to try to assist our team and use the distraction that they are creating now for us, whereas we were doing that at the early stage of this battle, and we're going to see if we can get some extra damage in this game. So one thing I wanted to also talk about throughout this gameplay is that you'll notice that the fuel tanks, the engine, get damaged a lot, and that is because the engine is at the front of this tank, and I'll put up an image on screen for you now to demonstrate that. Definitely be wary of that. If you're aiming at this tank in the lower plate, shoot towards the bottom left. More than often than not you're going to damage their engine, damage fuel tanks, set them on fire, and it does like to burn up, so you might want to consider taking something in your equipment and commander setup to help with that. But I just like to take the risk that I'm going to burn occasionally and invest it in the DPM and the mobility because it seems to be working so far, so that's what I have done. In the meantime, as I was waffling on there about the engine on the AMX 30B2 FORAD, this game's quickly turned into a bit of a ruffle stomp and a very nice victory. It's just the last remaining 2 enemy tanks. We're going to wait for our teammates to go forward as we hardly have any hit points left in play. We went for the tracks there. Unfortunately, we didn't track the FE4 to 11, but we do manage to get a shot there, retracking him with the 105mm gun, and pick up a very nice game there on Redshire in a very quick battle where we finished in second place in the MVP screen. A nice profit again of 270,000 silver, or over 300,000 silver with a premium account. 2 kills, 4.7k direct damage, 1500 assistance, and again, it was these kind of games that I was having over and over again, regardless of whether they were a victory or a defeat. It's a very solid support tank. It Obviously, we'll have the ability to have epic games occasionally, but it's going to be very, very solid for you and a pretty good pickup, I'll tell you right now. But we have 3 more games to get through, and then I'll give you my final thoughts. So we're now going to head on into the third gameplay. So you're joining me 1 minute into a battle here on Halfaya Pass in the 30B2 FORAD, and the first minute has basically just consisted of me getting into position, trying to get some vision like we have done in the first couple of games in today's video. It's been a little bit slower than usual, and that's due to the fact that this map is absolutely huge and you can get caught out very quickly, and in a tank like the 30B2 you do not want to get caught out quickly because you will get your hit points shredded and get taken out of the battle very quickly. So I'm just biding my time, waiting for my enemies below me to sort of move around towards the south. Then hopefully when they've created a little bit of a crossfire, I'm able to hopefully get some shells in on these tanks where I am trying to back out of harm's way right now with the enhanced smoke screen, and I highly recommend you take that. It will improve your concealment, and obviously actively using it will get you out of a jam many times in this tank. So there's so many tanks there. I'm just trying to see if I can get some cross shots across this valley, looking with the True Vision system until the smoke clears, and I'm considering going down and around, trying to create a crossfire myself by going into the center of the map and hopefully coming up behind those enemies. Fighting them frontally is very difficult in this tank. Something that has nice turret armor like a Super M48 would be a great option here. Get a hold down, you're able to attempt to bounce some shells off of your turret, but you have no chance of bouncing shells in this tank. So you do have to rely on having support, taking chancy shots and trying to play in that flanking support style gameplay, and this tank does it excellently. When someone rushes you, especially a light tank, it does have that capacity with that nice 20mm autocannon to shred them, and as you can see here, we're using that on the side of an M60A1 and we deal a nice substantial amount of damage, and then we follow it up with a shot right through the side, and I believe we ammo racked the M60A1 and we took him out of the game. For the third game running, we are using the mobility build because I'm still using some heat rounds. I used the mobility setup for most of my gameplay in the session, however I did switch towards the DPM one at the end as I become more comfortable with the tank and wanted that little bit of extra firepower, and I felt pretty comfortable with the mobility already. The base engine power is pretty nice, so the DPM build is probably, if you're feeling comfortable and you feel like sometimes you want to be a bit more aggressive than maybe you should, then that one might be the one for you. So we've gone into the center like I thought I was going to do earlier. We get a nice shot there on the move where run and gun comes in handy as a commander skill. Pop our smoke there, so hopefully we don't get shot in the rear, and then we're going to try and flank the map, circle round, and hopefully pick up some shots on these tanks that are all in front of me on that hill. We get spotted again. I believe it's by that same Leopard 101. We're getting some spotting assistance on him, and we're able to get some nice return fire. You have a great DPM, very similar, like I showed you in the review section of today's video with the Leopard 1A1. So you don't want to get into a fight where you're trading 1-for-1, or you're getting into a fight where you're trading with something that has good DPM. You want to make use of these kind of positions here where you're sniping, you're getting the sides and rear of the enemy, and you make use of that autocannon, especially when you're up close and personal. Make use of it when you're at sort of mid to close range. It's easier to use the penetration that way because it's such a low penetration value, and you also give your position away if you're using it at a big distance. Like you will see a lot of players doing it at the moment, and I've seen so many people using the secondary ammunition because obviously it's fun to use because it goes very quick, but it gives their position away and you're able to spot them with the shell tracers and then use the True Vision to find them. So definitely watch out for that secondary ammunition getting you caught out and getting you taken out. But we've Coming back to this game, and we've managed to pick up 2.9k direct damage with 2 kills and 720 assistance. We are up by 5 tanks. We got a bit of flanking fire, and now it's the end stages. There's 2 tanks left, and I've spotted my target. It's a full health Chieftain Mark 5, and I know I can use the 20mm autocannon in the side. So we truck him first, so we get any assistance on anyone else that's going to shoot at him. Aim for the rear and the engine, completely get rid of our, or completely nearly get rid of our 20mm clip there, and then we finish it up with a nice killing blow with the 105mm gun, and that picks us up 5.7k direct damage, 720 assistance, and again, a very, very nice profit, even though we've provided some premium, I believe, in that game. Above 300,000 silver without or with a premium account. So that's it for the third game there. We're now going to head on into the fourth gameplay. So you're joining me here in a game on Vineyards in the AMX 30B2 FORAD, and as you can see, we are in this game using the DPM build, which is the one where I forego the advanced powertrain for the vents, get a better DPM, get better gun handling, better view range, and I actually use full premium for the shell velocity and the penetration. And yeah, it's kind of my treat myself setup, because I might make a little bit less silver than the build that I have shown you in the first 3 gameplays, but it feels a little bit more competitive, especially when you do get the hang of this tank. So here on Vineyards, we are on an encounter battle, in an encounter battle I should say, where the capture circle is in H5, H6. We're going to come to this section here, behind this rock at the start in D3, and just try and get some side shots in tanks that are making their way down the A line. It's again another position where I'm just trying to make the most of the sniping capabilities of this tank. I'm trying to preserve as many hit points as possible at the start. This is a very wide open map. If I get myself into trouble, I will get my hit points completely shredded very quickly. And this game is going to be the worst game out of all of the games I'm going to show you today in terms of the amount of damage or combined damage that happens, and also the fact that this will be a defeat, spoiler alert, but I wanted to include it because it really does highlight the weaknesses of this tank and the inability for massive carries and massive games compared to a lot of other era 2 premium tanks, whether they're medium tanks, light tanks, main battle tanks, whatever you want, tank destroyers, anything like that. It's a very, very good support tank. It's capable of very, very nice games. Of course, the best players will do exceptionally well in it. It feels very, very consistent at dealing between 4 and 6k damage for a player of sort of my quality, and you can check my stats if you want to on what stars. Not that stats are obviously the be all and end all, but for the majority of the player base, I think it's going to be a pretty solid tank. But there are a lot more tanks out there that are very, very competitive. They have a little bit of armor, they're a bit more forgiving for a newer player, and you don't have to focus on using this secondary 20mm autocannon, because that is something that can get you into trouble. Like I alluded to, I think it was in the last gameplay, you can see the shield tracers from a mile off when they are rapidly firing, and with the True Vision system in Cold War, people are going to be able to spot you, and they're going to definitely try and find your shell tracers and take you out, especially the better players. So sometimes it can be more of a hindrance, and if you're not very quick at switching between your primary gun and the 20mm autocannon, you've just got to make use of that ammo select button and practicing switching really, really quickly and just get as quick as possible. But it's definitely not going to be a mechanic that is going to be for everyone. If you're used to playing something that has the multiple weapon system already, like a BMP2 or a BMP3, the Eastern Alliance Era 2 and Era 3 light tanks, then you'll probably do quite well in this tank. But yeah, so definitely something to watch out for. And for the rest of this game here on Vineyards, we've already had a decent start, but we are getting capped out, and I've rushed over here to try and defend the cap. It gets reset just as I got here, and then we have a Leopard VT2 come at us. Fortunately, we track him with our shot, and we're going to try and now get out of the way, get a shot into him with our 105, switch to our 20mm autocannon, and then we're going to try and use the mobility to get out of dodge as the base has been reset. That's definitely not a tank I want to get rammed by. You don't have a lot of armor and you're not an extremely heavy tank. You can ram light tanks, of course, but you definitely don't want to get rammed by a heavier main battle tank or medium tank, because you're going to use a lot of your hit points. So as we're running away, we're always trying to keep our turret facing who is chasing us, so we can get snapshots in on the move. And fortunately, we are going to be able to get around into that Leopard VT2 and take him out. But he has chased us down, hounded us, and we're on 63 hit points. It's now 5 versus 5, so a very close battle indeed. And we're going to have to be ultra careful, and this is where the weakness of this tank lies. If you lose hit points very, very early on, like we have here, there's still 5 minutes left in this battle, then it can be extremely hard to have a big influence. So I highly recommend trying to be as passive for as long as possible without being sort of useless to your team, if that makes sense. You want to get into a position where you have crossfire, you want to use your mobility, you want to use your gun for sure, but you don't want to be reckless and lose all of your hit points straight away. You don't want to try and tank a shot because you can't, and you want to think about your positioning, make the most of your 8 degrees of gun depression, try and show as little of your turret as possible, try and make use of bushes and hard cover, and when you're advancing like I'm doing here, advance from rock to rock. Try and keep hard cover in between you and the opponents, and yeah, that's how you try and utilize the AMX 30B2 FORAD as best as possible. But it's getting to a very awkward situation in this battle. It's 4 versus 3 in our favour at the moment, but there are some very healthy tanks on the enemy team, and I'm just asking for some help, and I've got myself into a little bit of a sticky situation. We have a BMP2, but also on a one shot, so it would be very unfortunate if we were the last 2 ones left alive to take this one down, wouldn't it? So we're going to have to see if that happens, but we're just trying to find any kind of crossfire or side shot that we can. We didn't manage to, so we're going to have to try and use the mobility to reset, get as much distance from the enemy as possible, and I'm going to ask the BMP2, even though he is on a one shot as well, to provide the vision. He has the concealment and the view range able to outspot the enemy, whereas hopefully I can put my gun to work if he spots some of the enemy. So in a situation like this, where it's a 2 versus 3 and 2 of the enemy team are in a platoon, you want to give yourself the best possible chance. I'm giving myself the most distance between myself and the enemy that I think I can. I'm going to ask my teammates for help. I'm going to ask them to try and spot for me. I'm taking a wide route here, so I'm not able to be seen with the true vision system. And I'm trying to avoid knocking down any large trees that might give away where my position is. And I'm just trying to get into a position where I'm able to get any kind of shot on the enemy and whittle them down bit by bit, and they're very healthy. At this distance it's going to be very difficult, even for the premium APF SDS rounds. There's an FE4-11, which is obviously a very broken tank with excellent armor and very fast firing gun, and there's a Type 82 as well, who is crossing, and I'm hopefully going to try and get a shot here, but it's just one of those situations where I just cannot find the shot. I don't want to move any further forward at the moment, so the BMP2 is going to retreat around, come and join me over here, and hopefully come in from a different angle. So I'm trying not to make myself as obvious as possible, try and sit in the shadowy areas using this hard cover to my right, and just playing this patient waiting game. And if I had even sort of 500 to 1,000 hit points, I might be able to take a shot and be able to let the BMP2 use the ATGMs that that tank has to good use, and I might be the one being able to spot for the enemy. But it just so happens that we're both on low hit points. I don't have any hit points to spare, and I don't have any armor to be able to try and bounce a shell. Rightly so, the enemy have started capping, which is going to draw me and this BMP2 to the capture circle. So I'm going to try and let the BMP2 go and spot for me, asking I need a target, and then I'm going to try and get a resetting shot in on the capture circle. As time starts to tick on though, and as more of the enemy get into the capture circle, I'm just going to have to go for it now. There's no shots available to me there. I've never really defended an encounter here on Vineyards from that position, so I don't know if there are shots into the cap. Unfortunately, I get spotted as I try to approach, so I pop my smoke and then I try and use the relatively low profile nature of the 30B2 FORAD here to go down these rocks and come up here and try and get some shots into the cap to reset. It's now just one tank again in the capture circle, and I've just chosen the wrong moment to advance over this gap. I get spotted by the FE4 to 11, miss my shell there on the Centurion 9. We do get some shots in with our 20mm autocannon, but unfortunately our friendly BMP2 does get taken out, so I'm going to have to get reset with the 6th sense. I'm going to act like I'm going back into the field, then swing back around and try and head sort of down the K line, and hopefully they're not going to be able to spot me. And I felt like this was my only option at the moment. I just have to get shots in from distance, but unfortunately it's not going to go too well from this position. We get spotted by the enemy medium tank behind us, who does catch us out, the Type 82. And now I'm going to act like I'm going into the field again, and I'm going to try and swing around again, but it's a bit too little too late. And it does highlight the weaknesses of this tank, where you don't have the armour, and if you do lose the hit points very early on, your game carrying capabilities towards the end become very, very hard indeed to deal with. But nonetheless, even in a defeat, we still picked up just shy of 6k direct damage, 132 assistance. We got 3 kills, and we still held a profit of 109,000 without a premium account, 164,000 with. And I wanted to include that one just to show you what I think highlights the real big downfalls of this tank, especially to maybe a newer player or players that don't feel like they're the most aggressive or knowledgeable in terms of positioning on the maps. But that's it for that gameplay. We are now going to head into the 5th and final gameplay of today's video, which just so happens to be the best game that I've had in this tank in my very short time playing it. So we're now into the 5th and final game of today's video here in the AMX 30B2 FORAD. We're on Alamein and we are in a standard battle. We are going to use the mobility as usual to try and race into a position to try and get some early vision, but also some crossfire on tanks that are making their way into position, so it gives me the best chance of avoiding taking any kind of damage whatsoever in this glass cannon tank. And I'd just like to take a mention here at the aesthetics of this tank. I think it looks really, really nice with the skin that's on this tank. That does come with the tank. You just have to apply a clear, the clear camo within the appearances tab, but it does come with this look, and I think it looks pretty nice. So hats off to Wargaming for that one. And we've made our way into this position here in F5, which Brock Lesnar will be very, very happy about, and we get a nice shot there for 443 damage, low rolling a bit into a tank crossing. Then we fire into the dirt because I can aim, and it's a little bit of a risky situation here to stay here too long, as I know the enemies know that I am here, and my teammates are all kind of bunched up in E5, E3, E4, I should say. I can't read the map either, so I want to be as wary as possible to maybe turn around and go and help my tanks that are situated in the C8, C9 position. Fortunately, one of the enemy team decides to do what is the right thing and take himself out of the game to give us the best chance of winning this one. And we're just trying to find any kind of shot, any kind of vision, so we don't manage to get any there. So what we do is we turn around and immediately we come into contact with another enemy AMX 30B2 FORAD. We get the first shot off, and then we're going to come up as he's looking for us and where we're going to be. We are going to rip into the back of this tank and we are going to completely shred this enemy AMX 30B2 FORAD, and that player's probably regretting buying the Ultimate Season Pass right about now. But it just goes to show you the power of having this multiple weapon system and the firepower on this tank. When you are able to utilise that 20mm autocannon, you really can do some insane amounts of damage and really wreck the enemy. So we've picked up 3k direct damage already. We take a shot from the distance as we miss the other enemy medium tank in the distance. So I pop my enhanced smoke screen there. We repair our ammo rack because we want to give our DPM or get it back to what it should be. And then we're going to come around here a different angle, try and use the hard cover to my right on this ridge to protect me from the enemies in the distance and see if I can get a shot on who shot me and hopefully give them a bit of retribution. Again, in this gameplay we're using the DPM build. I went intentionally there for the tracks of the FE4 to 11 because penetrating at this distance would have been very difficult at that angle. We wouldn't have been able to shoot the weakest point on the upper hull as we're looking up into the FE4 to 11. It would have gone through the lower plate potentially, but maybe not at mid to long ranges. That's where the heat would have probably come in handy if it would have been able to go through anyway. But as I digress, we managed to get there some nice assistance on this enemy medium tank crossing the field, and we also get a nice side shot, and we're just whittling our damage up very, very slowly. The the armadillo comes in after us. I'm obviously thinking of the damn song. Unfortunately for us, sets us on fire, damages our fuel tank there, our engine, and we have a fire, meaning that we're now on 855 hit points. So I'm going to take a little look there where the armadillo's going. And he's going around that rock, so we're going to just make sure he doesn't come round the rear of us. We get a glimpse of him there again, and it looks like he's thinking twice. We still do have damaged engine there, so we have to be careful. We get shot in it again, we will burn and probably get taken out of this game. So I'm waiting for as long as possible for my enhanced smoke screen to come back, and then we're going to hopefully put our gun to work again. And at this moment in time there are enemies all around us, so it's just trying to keep an eye on the minimap, trying to keep an eye on who might have shots on us, but also trying to get shots on the enemies where possible. I tried to fire at that FE4 to 11 and forgot that I actually had the 20mm autocannon loaded. That's definitely something you can do, and I'm so rusty at playing with the tanks because I had a pretty long break, two pretty long breaks I should say, for me anyway, at sort of 2 weeks a pop, so I'm getting used to that again. That side's kind of cleared out of our team, so now we're going to have to go join up with the rest of our team here, and hopefully we're able to assist them, and then maybe we can be the sort of vision later on in the battle for the teammates that are down here. But try and clear out this light tank. I think it's the armadillo that's causing an absolute nightmare to our team, so we're going to come around here and we're going to get a nice little bit of retribution here. We notice this armadillo's coming, he's going to be turning away from our opponent, so we just casually drive in front of him and he drives into us and gets taken out. So we're now up to 4.2k direct damage, 1.2k assistance and 730 blocked. That is all from the armadillo and that very small gun that the tank has. We popped our smoke to make sure we didn't take any more fire and they couldn't see where we were. We're going to reset our sixth sense, then we're going to pop off and try and defend the base that is getting captured by the enemy. We are up by 1 in a 4 versus 3 scenario. Two of our teammates look like they're going towards the base, and I have a heavy tank to the rear of me who looks pretty fast, so it's probably an Eastern Alliance heavy tank that's following me. Nothing like an FE4 to 11 who would have been pretty slow. I was thinking about going around as sort of long as possible, not knocking down any buildings, but I want to get there as quick as possible in case more of the enemies enter the cap. The Leopard 1A1 there manages to outspot us, but we dodged the shot somehow. He just missed us basically, but I'm going to say we dodged. We get the vision on him, we get a shot into him, and now we can use this ridge line to fall back a little bit our enemy heavy tank is getting shots into him, and we're going to poke over and hopefully get the killing shot into him. And it looks like we ammo racked him there, so that would have been a pretty epic way to get taken out for the Leopard 1A3, I believe it was. I obviously can't read in my old age. So now it's a 2 versus 2, and I ask the friendly T72 on my team to follow me, and he will oblige. We get a ping there. Hopefully that's from our teammates letting us know where the enemies are. So I'm going to let the heavy tank take the lead in this scenario for the moment. He does have the armor to withstand a shot, whereas I don't. And we're going to try and get a shot on this enemy 30B2. We missed our first one, but with the great DPM of this gun, we managed to come around. He's going to try and circle us. So we just stop, reverse back, and we managed to snap a shot in there. And at that close range, we can just auto-aim that one. And almost always that's going to go in. I'm nudging that tank, not out of disrespect, just in case the enemy heavy tank is situated down this track here and was aiming at me. I wanted to make sure my tank was fully protected. And now it's me and the T72 versus the final remaining tank on the enemy team. I'm going to take the long way round and go towards the capture circle and try and draw the enemy heavy tank to us. I can't remember the last place that this heavy tank was spotted, so I'm going to go forward towards the capture circle, and in doing so hopefully I can also be the vision for our team. The heavy tank is going to be going up on what looks like the hill in E7, E8, and we do have a nice position here where we're able to use all of these rocks to hide the AMX 30B2 FORAD here. So I stop here, have a quick look in the distance with the free camera to see if I can see any tanks. Then I decide where I'm going to go. I'm going to hide behind this destructible cover in the middle of the capture circle. We get into it, and I do have my enhanced smoke screen to pop should the enemy tank appear. But the enemy tank is capturing the base, and as long as the heavy tank comes in with me soon, we're going to be able to cap this one out very, very easily indeed. The enemy FV4-11 has no chance of getting across the map in the time that both of us could cap. So I do ask for his assistance in capping. The friendly heavy tank obliges, and that is going to be a wrap for this game. Say a nice GG. I'm going to fire some friendly shots into the air, some warning shots to let the FV4-11 know not to come after us. And as long as none of us do anything stupid here, that's a win. So I would usually skip to the end here, but why not watch this tank just do a little wiggle and a little dance while I talk you through the end of today's video and my thoughts on this tank. So what do I think of this tank? It's a great support vehicle with a unique feature that is going to benefit players that want something new or are experienced in playing with the multiple weapon system. You are a glass cannon tank. Maybe for newer players and the less experienced players, this won't do you as well as something more well armored and more forgiving, like a the Super M48 or the Leopard VT2, but it's still a very decent tank and well worth picking up the Ultimate Season Pass for all of the other goodies, as well as we do celebrate at the end there with a victory shot into the sky. So we finish in our 5th gameplay hit in the MVP slot with 5.2k direct damage and 1762 assistance with 4 kills, 1385 experience. There's only a 2nd class, I believe, there, or 3rd class, I can't remember, but a nice profit again, even though we're firing full prem. 190,000 silver profit without a premium account and 256,000 silver 256,000 silver profit with a premium account. So yeah, a very, very nice tank. I really enjoyed playing it. Nice and unique. Nice to have a French medium tank. The 2nd French tank in Cold War behind the AMX 30 and SS 11 TCA, and hopefully that's a good sign of things to come. So thank you all again for your patience whilst I was away. Had a couple of 2-week periods, but now I'm back playing, really enjoying it. I'm feeling good, but hopefully nothing else happens and I'm able to get the content out as quick as possible. But thank you all so much for watching today's video. If you have, and if you have liked it, please leave a like and a comment below. It really helps me out. And until next time, I'll see you on the battlefield, and bye for now.